which to me is one of the great causes across the country. It helps people to live from a place of integrity and higher consciousness and spirit. And I'm honored to be a part of PBS. This program is about something called excuses. Excuses, excuses, excuses. Habits, habits, habits. So many people live their lives from these habits and don't have to. There are a couple of quotes that I want you to look at that I put right up here for you. The first is a very important concept. Never underestimate your power to change yourself. Never overestimate your power to change others. And the reason I put this quote out right here at the beginning of this program about excuses being gone is that no matter who you are, no matter what age you are, no matter how long you've lived, the promise I have of this program is that if you follow the steps that I am going to outline here for you, that if you've been overweight for your entire lifetime, if you've been addicted to anything for your entire lifetime, if you've lived a life of poverty for your lifetime, if relationships haven't worked for you, whatever it is, however long it's been with you, that there is a way to change those habits and to change the thinking that supports those habits. I've come to know that. I've written an entire book about it. I believe in it. I've been practicing it not only in my own life, but with other people in workshops all around the world. And I know that there is something that you can do about them. You can indeed change anything about yourself. Don't underestimate your own personal ability to make just that happen. The second quote says something that is responding to what it is that you have to do to make that happen. Lao Tzu spoke about this in the Tao Te Ching. When you correct your mind, everything else will fall into place. So whatever these habits are, whatever it is that you have lived with for a very, very long time, it's about don't underestimate your own ability to change it, and if you work at correcting your mind, in a very short amount of time, you can go from someone who had these habits to someone who's living at a very different level. I did a program not too long ago here for public television called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. And it was based upon the great teachings of Lao Tzu 2,500 years ago in the Tao Te Ching that some people call the wisest book ever written. In that book, what I learned and what I tried to offer to the public who watch public television, it taught us, and it taught me, what to think. What ways to go about thinking that we didn't before. So many of us who grew up here in the Western world believe that you have to always strive, that you have to work hard, that the harder that you work and the more you set goals and the tougher that you are, the more you get done. In Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, I learned to think flexible, to think soft, to become humble, to be non-interfering, to remember that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Take that step. Live in the present moment. So this show, this program that I'm speaking about here, is different from that. Because I really think I know what to think. And I practiced it for an entire year as I wrote the book, Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life, and put that program out. But what so many people have difficulty with is, okay, I may know what to think, but I don't know how to change the way that I have been thinking. I just keep repeating the same patterns over and over and over again. And this is what I want to address here with you in this program, that there is a method, I call it a technology, there is a program, there is a paradigm, and I'm going to present it to you before this program is ended. And it's the promise I make right here at the beginning, that if you follow the steps, the steps, and you'll see if you look at this beautiful set here. And this staircase is, I asked them to create it because it is the result of a quotation from Mark Twain. Habit is habit, and not to be flung out the window by any man, but coaxed down the stairs one step at a time. You can almost think of yourself as at the top of this staircase. And each one of these steps on this staircase represents a way that we have of thinking that in the end keeps us either stuck in that habitual way of thinking or changing those thoughts and no longer identifying yourself as someone who is stuck, who's had a destiny imposed upon them. Basically, there are two very large excuses that we carry with us, and I want to talk a little bit about them here in the opening of this program, and then as we move along, go into the very specific steps that will help you to identify how to make those changes. And believe me, the idea that because you've done it for a very long time, or because you've lived with a particular habit for a very long time, is not a reason that it has to take a very long time to change it. If you're committed to that change and believe in it and follow the steps one step at a time, you can emerge from this staircase. I told them I'd like to walk up this thing, but it's hanging from a thread up there, and I think that could be a mess, all right? So, the two big excuses that as I sat down to write this book and put this program together, one of them I learned about in a book written by a man who's become a very close friend of mine. His name is Bruce Lipton. And he wrote a wonderful book that I encourage you to look at and examine and read and study. It's called The Biology of Belief. The biology of belief really has a whole different approach. I was watching a television show one evening, and there was a man being interviewed on one of the talk shows, and I heard him just spew out, well, you can't change your DNA, that's for sure. I mean, you can't change your heredity. Whatever you were given genetically is something that you're stuck with. Well, Bruce talks about a new science called epigenetics. And I was sitting there and I was taking notes and I was writing about the opening parts of the book, the Excuses Be Gone book, and I stood up and I looked and I said, you're absolutely wrong. You have within you, this might be shocking to you, but you have within you the power, the capacity, the ability, and it doesn't take that much work to literally change around the DNA that is the basic genetic makeup of your life. By changing around the way you perceive something, I've said it many times, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And that goes not just for things outside of you, but it goes for things inside of you as well. There is a lot of evidence now that supports the idea that we have within our brains the capacity to change the way we look at anything about ourselves and have a whole new way of experiencing what takes place in our own bodies. He speaks over and over again about the power of the mind to deal with diseases. Bruce was a professor at the University of Wisconsin and at Stanford and taught medical students for over 20 years. And one of the reasons he left that academic world is with the research that was being done, he began to realize that how we perceive something within ourselves, in the environment within us, how we perceive it can literally take the things that are going on inside of us and alter them and change them. Can you imagine that? So it's like a whole new way of thinking. One of the very fascinating studies that is in the biology of belief it's the placebo effect. You all know what a placebo is. I mean, someone tells you that you've got arthritis and they say, here's an arthritis pill. If you take this pill for the arthritis that you have, it's going to make your arthritis go away. And your mind begins to process that information, and before you know it, large numbers of people who take a little sugar pill, but because they believe in their hearts, they believe that this is going to do it, that arthritis begins to diminish in the body. And he did a fascinating study about people who were having things like knee surgery. And he had the various control groups, and one of the groups in there was going in for knee surgery, but they didn't do any surgery. In fact, they didn't do anything. They just opened it up, they put little holes in the knee, they went in there, and they looked around, they didn't even scrape, they did nothing. Another group, they did the traditional way of treating the knee. Another way, they did another more experimental group. And then they found out when they looked at the three groups that the people who were told that they had knee surgery improved just as significantly as the people who would have the actual treatment for it. That the belief system, and one of the guys, after 2 years, was running around and doing high jumping and dancing and so on. And he didn't find out for 2 years later. We didn't do anything with you. You were in the group. We were just testing this. Blew his mind. So, just keep in mind that this idea that when you think your heredity or your DNA strands, whatever it is, are the things that you can't do anything about, and they're the great big excuse category that we have. I can't help it. It's just in my DNA. Is something that we're now beginning to realize you do have much more control over it. What I'd like to remind all of you, and it's where I took my own take on something called The Secret, which many of you saw the movie of it, and many of you read the books and so on. I had a little different take on that. I said, we do not attract into our lives what we want. We attract what we are. And who we are is really nothing more than the beliefs that we carry around about who we are and what we're capable of doing. So that was the first big excuse. DNA, heredity, toss it out. You can change that. And when you read the biology of belief, you'll see lots and lots of people have done just that by changing around the way they think. The second book that I read that is even bigger excuse category is called Virus of the Mind. And the Virus of the Mind was written by Richard Brody. This book takes a look at not just the physical kinds of conditioning that we've had, but it takes a look at the cultural and what is called the memetic, M-E-M-E-T-I-C, memetic. The basic unit of genetics is the gene. The basic unit of something called memetics is the word that Richard Dawson called. It's called the meme, a meme, M-E-M-E. And these memes are really viruses. Now, you know what a virus is. Most of you know what a virus is. Every virus, from my research, and I'm not a scientist, but this is what I came up with as I researched to write this book and do this program. The viruses in your body, for example, have three functions. The first function of a virus is to duplicate itself. And it doesn't care who it's involved with or whatever, it just duplicates and duplicates and duplicates. It splits and then it duplicates again over and over and over. The second function of a virus is to infiltrate. So it duplicates, and any time that there's an opening, it will infiltrate. It will go into some place that it has an opening. And the third function of a virus is to spread. Duplicate, infiltrate, and spread to as many bodies as it possibly can. That's what a virus does. And it doesn't care who it does it with. It's not interested. It doesn't play favorites. When it gets into your body, that's what it's going to do. And we all know that if you have a virus, that taking an antibiotic is absolutely a waste of time, even though so many people go to their physicians and beg for these antibiotics, which will only treat bacteria, but very often they act as placebos. If you believe that it's going to take care of it, then sure enough, very often it works for you. but all it does is accumulate more and more of these little tiny antibody things in your body. And the same thing is true of a virus in a computer. You know, these viruses in computers have the same thing. It's like you get a virus in your computer, and it just duplicates. And the third function of the virus, of course, is to spread. So not only does it want to get into your computer, but it likes to get into your neighbors as well. And before you know it, you've got a major crisis. And you've all read stories about these. I have no idea how that works. You know, how this thing can duplicate, infiltrate, and then spread from one computer to the next, but somehow that's what they do. The book Virus of the Mind affected me very dramatically because it speaks about the very same functions, but there's no particles, there's no things. And these are ideas. The definition of a meme is an idea or a thought or a belief in your own mind that can spread to and from other people's minds, transferring ideas and beliefs mentally. And where did it come from? Where do you get these memes, these ideas, these beliefs that we carry around inside of us that are handed to us? Now remember, we're talking about an idea that's in your mind that goes into somebody else's mind, like this is an idea from your mother, or from your father, or from your grandparents, or from their grandparents, or for people who lived in the 4th century, or whatever, that these ideas get placed into our mind. They have absolutely, there's no particle, you can't find them, there's no substance to them, and they are constantly duplicating. You hear them over and over and over again. These mind viruses are placed into our heads. They duplicate, they infiltrate, and they spread. And they go from one, and they become cultural norms. They become things that we absolutely believe are truths. And we constantly carry them around with us wherever we go. We tell other people about them. We have absolute, total faith that these are truths, when in fact, they're just ideas that are viruses. And Richard Brody's book, Virus of the Mind, is a very powerful look at how we can do something about these viruses. I have many examples of these. I have examples of these in my own life. My mother, who is almost 93 now, and was on a PBS special with me in San Francisco a few years ago, my own mom, grew up in the Depression. She was a young woman in the early 1930s and right up through the end of the Depression. And she was able to put a lot of these memes, these mind viruses, into my head, into my brother's head. And she got them from her mom, and she got them from, and we call this, some of us call this a depression mentality. And we carry around these viruses, these memes, and we live with them. I remember when I first got married to my wife, she had 2 children from a previous marriage, and they just told me about this the other day. They were 7 and 5 or something like that, or maybe a little older, and they came over to the house where we were going to live in Florida, and I thought, well, I'll just welcome them, you know, these 2 young kids, my son Shane and my daughter Stephanie, and I came and I brought them some jelly donuts, a big whole bag of jelly donuts, which I loved when I was a kid. I mean, I used to literally be able to eat an entire dozen of them. To me, there was nothing better in this world than, and especially when you got the big juicy ones with the big globs of jelly in there. I don't even touch that stuff now, but I did for. So I brought them these bags, and they had never seen a jelly donut before. They had never eaten anything like that. And Stephanie took one bite and went, oh. And Shane went, what is this? And they took 6 jelly donuts and they put it into the garbage. They just tossed them into the like, well, who would eat this? And I saw them do that, and I almost fainted. my depression mentality, the meme, you know, that you are poor. And I went over to the garbage, and I reached in, and I started eating the jelly donuts. Just knocking off a few of the things that were in that. And I ate like all 6 of them, I think. Because every time they tell me this story, they just are still aghast that anybody would actually eat a jelly donut, let alone one out of the garbage, you know? But that depression mentality of mine is a meme that I still carry around even to this day. I mean, when my children finish with their toothpaste tubes, I've got about 2 more months of brushing my teeth on what they throw away. I do. And they get rid of a bar of soap from the shower, and they just toss the soap into the, like there's this much soap. Well, that's 6 showers at least, you know? And then I take all of those little pieces and I put the pieces together to make a bigger piece. And I find myself doing that. Probably my very favorite is something that I only do when I'm all alone, when nobody else is around. But why I'm admitting this on national television, I have no idea. But what I do when I can't, do you ever like can't, you can't find something, you know? It's like you have a letter in front of you and you're looking at it, and then you look over here and it's just gone. You pick everything up, or there's a check there or something, and you look everywhere, you're underneath it, and you start going crazy, you know? My favorite is with vitamins. If I pour some vitamins out and I drop one on the floor, and it just goes into a big black hole, you know? It's just the Bermuda Triangle, and you look everywhere. You're down on your knees, you know? It's got, and you don't want to give up. It's like, how could it disappear? How could it just be gone? It's just gone. But there's nobody home. So I've got this something I learned. It's not really sulking. It's just like, it's just insanity. That's all it is. Ah! It's got to be here. It's got to be here somewhere. How could I possibly have that? It couldn't be this. And then I walk and I realize that there's nobody there, and a little profanity possibly, and I find myself acting in a really irrational, crazy way, and I catch myself. And even at 68, I still find myself, when I'm all alone, because I don't want to do this around, because this is Wayne Dyer, and he's not supposed to act like this. He's supposed to be a spiritual teacher, and so. And we carry around these kinds of memes, these kinds of ideas, and they extend not just to those kind of silly little things. They extend to, for example, if you're a woman, what is it possible for you to do? What did you learn when you were a young girl about what women can do, about what women can't do? When I was in high school, when I graduated from high school in 1958, I think 1 or 2% of the people admitted to medical school and law school were women. Today, a half a century or more later, it's 50%. We've changed. But these memes are things that, you know, we grew up to believe in. What is possible for me, what's not possible for me, what can happen, can I attract something into my life, can I not, and so on. And most of these are just viruses. They're viruses that are in our minds that convince us that we can't change, we can't make things happen, or we can make things happen, but somebody else has to do it for us. 95% of the people, what I learned in one of the books I was speaking to you about, have absolutely no genetic basis for their unhappiness, for their fear, for the kinds of things that they're taking drugs to overcome in their lives. 95% no genetic basis, and yet we still carry around these ideas. I can't help it, I've always been this way, I'm depressed, I'm unhappy, I'm miserable, I'm full of stress. Stress is one of my favorite memes. It's a meme. There's no stress in the world. None. If I gave you an assignment to go out and bring me back a bucket full of stress, you would never find it. You'd be looking, and just like for the vitamins, you'd be saying, there's got to be something here someplace. Everybody's suffering from it. We're all taking drugs to overcome it. All there are people out there thinking stressful thoughts. And virtually all of these stressful thoughts, you have to be under stress when you move from one city to another, when you go through a divorce, when you have a fire, when there's an illness, when there's an accident, when somebody disappoints you. That's a stressful thing. Those are all memes. They're just viruses that have placed in your mind that tell you that this is the way you're supposed to act, and this is the way we acted, and this is the way our parents acted, and we want to really go to work at eliminating those kinds of things. So you don't have to really remain a victim of any of these things. What you need is to follow this excuses be gone paradigm. There's a wonderful quote from the Dhammapada, which some people call the original teachings of Buddha and the Buddhist doctrine. All that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. If one speaks or acts with a pure thought, happiness follows one like a shadow that never leaves. Change those thoughts, especially those thoughts that have been with you since you were a little boy or a little girl, that you've come to believe that it's difficult for me to overcome these things that I've had. We have a major obesity crisis in our culture. Something like 30% of our population are chronically obese. And will tell you, if I talk to them, that I can't do anything about that. I got fat genes. It's just something that's always been with me. I've never been able to overcome it. We have a major addiction crisis in our culture. People addicted not just to illegal things, but to legal things that cause enormous amounts of problems. And the belief that we can't overcome those things. People living in fear about the economy, about not being able to deal with something like losing a job or having a house foreclosed or whatever. The belief that has to be a depressing, awful, fearful kind of experience. These are all memes. These are all ideas. In a recession, there's great opportunity. And many people will take advantage of that because they just don't think that they want to live in something called fear. Each and every one of us has this. So we basically have two minds. Our first mind is the conscious mind. This conscious mind is the one that's making all of these decisions about everything that we're going to do on a regular basis, and we're kind of aware of the thoughts that we have and so on. And then there's this habitual mind. And this habitual mind is what some call the subconscious mind. I have a little trouble with the subconscious mind because if it's subconscious, it's below your level of being able to perceive it and use it and access it. So I use the term habitual mind with the understanding that what I have learned in Excuses Be Gone is that we can go into that habitual mind, that subconscious mind that has allowed us to stay in these places for so long, and we can retrieve a new way of being, a way of being that can happen quite quickly. I'll give you an example of that. I bring people from all over the country and all over the world to a 3-day workshop on overcoming excuses. And there was a woman who came there who had been binging and purging every day for 22 years. And she was very, very sickly. And she didn't look like she was going to even make it through the workshop. She is now a year and a half completely free of it, and she did it all and changed it in about 45 minutes of really examining the way that she was thinking, going through the steps in the Excuses Be Gone paradigm, and she looks radiant these days. I saw people who quit smoking who've never been able to do it by instantly examining some of the thoughts that keep them from being where they want to be. So every action that we have is a choice. And this program is really about choosing and not excusing. So the habits that we have are behaviors that we use over and over and over again. And they become just excuses from mind viruses and memes that we've carried with us for our lifetime. Now, I went to my website and I put out a request for everybody who visits that website. If they would send to me the most common excuses that they use in their life for why their life isn't working the way they would like it to work. And I didn't put any limits other than that. Just tell me, what are they? And what I did is I took out the top 18 excuses. They are the entire third chapter of the book, and I'm going to share them with you because every single one of these are something that I know you've used, or if you haven't, you're living with someone who does. So here are the top 18. First one, if I want to change, it's going to be difficult. Change is difficult. It's a meme. Whether it's true or not, we're going to examine a little bit later. It's going to be risky. In other words, if I were to do this and try this, whatever it might be, make these changes, it's going to involve risk. It's a meme. It's a mind virus. It's going to take a long time. You know, it's taken me 40 years to become this way, and I've been living this way, so it's going to take me another 40 years. Well, you don't have 40 years, you know. But nevertheless, it's going to take a long time. If I were to do and live the kind of life that I would like to live, there's going to be family drama. There's going to be people out there, aunts and uncles and in-laws and people. They're going to, you know, if I wanted to move to Montana or if I wanted to take up a new career, there's going to be huge family drama. Total meme. Whether it's true, mostly unlikely, unless you decide that that's what you want your life to be. I don't deserve it. A meme. How could there be anything out there in this world that you don't deserve? You are a piece of God. How could the source, how could God create something, anyone that isn't deserving of all of the abundance and all of the prosperity and all of the love that comes from the source? It's not my nature. Your nature is a meme. The idea that this, you know, that you're shy because you can't do anything about that. It's not my nature. I can't afford it. This is one of my all-time favorites, and I'll deal with it a little bit later in the program. The idea that you can't afford to do something is one of the largest mind viruses that have been placed upon you, and it's something that I would urge you to never say again, that you can't afford to do something. Do not ever allow money to be a reason why you don't fulfill your dharma, your destiny, and what you're here to do. And I can tell you, coming from the background that I came from, living in foster homes, living on the east side of Detroit and working my way through everything that I've had, that I've never, ever, ever thought that I couldn't afford to do anything, including go to the university and pay my own way and whatever. Are you listening, my children out there? Especially the part about me paying my own way. You're hearing? Yeah, right. Are you taking notes? You guys are taking notes? Okay. No one will help me. How many times you've heard people say, I'd like to do that, but there's no help out there. I just can't, nobody's out there. There's 6 billion people on the planet. They're all waiting to help somebody. Almost all of them want to help you with what it is that you want to do, unless you carry around this mind virus that says, I'm all alone and I can't do anything about it. It's just a meme. It's never happened before. So because something has never happened before is exactly the perfect reason why it'll probably happen the next time, unless you have that mind virus. I'm not strong enough. You know, I'm too weak to do what I would really like to be able to do. It's a meme. I'm not smart enough. You're all geniuses. Every single one of you. You're all genius. You've just let yourself become de-geniused by life. You know, I have a son-in-law, his name is Joe. He didn't go to college, but he came over and put a wood floor in our house that is so beautiful. He spent several weeks on it, getting down on his hands and knees, measuring everything, and he walks on. If I had to do that wooden floor myself, it would never have gotten done, because he can do that, and there's other things that I can do. He wouldn't want to be up here giving this talk. Maybe he would. But everybody has within them a genius and should never tell themselves, I'm not smart enough. And it's something you would never, ever want to convey to your kids. But indeed, they learn these mind viruses, and they duplicate, and they infiltrate, and they spread, and you get to be, you know, an adult, and you start using these things, and they have no basis in reality at all. The rules won't let me. You know, Martin Luther King was in a prison in Montgomery, Alabama, and he wrote a letter to the American public. And he said, I want to remind you that everything that Hitler did was legal. And everything that the American patriots did, like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and James Madison and James Monroe and Patrick Henry and Benjamin Franklin, everything that they did was illegal. So that the rules ought not to be reasons why you do or don't do anything. One of my great teachers, Henry David Thoreau, reminded us about the importance, not the importance, the necessity of civil disobedience. That all these rules that we have, you know, when my beautiful mom was born in 1916, she was 4 years old before women even got the vote in America. And the women, I mean, half the population of our country was not involved in any decision-making in the first almost 200 years of our history. How absurd that is when we think about it now. And how did that change? Because people said, the hell with those rules. I don't care whether it's legal or not legal. If it's not moral and I have rules within me, I have to go to those. These are memes. I don't have the energy. I'm too tired. It's a meme. One of the commitments I made, and my kids have never heard me say it, is that I'm tired. It's a word that I stopped saying in my early 20s, because I used to hear people talking about that all the time. I'm so tired, I'm so tired. And the minute that you tell yourself that you're tired, your body begins to react to the thought that you are programming it to be. So if nothing else, just stop saying it. And, well, I'll get onto that later. My own personal family history is the reason why. You know, I'm the middle child. I mean, what do you expect from me? And no wonder I'm confused. I don't know where I'm up. I'm the youngest child. I'm the youngest child. No wonder people are always telling me what to do, and I just wait for somebody to tell me. I'm the oldest child. No wonder I have a superiority complex. I've been telling people what to do since I was born. So on. Or my parents were divorced when I was 4 years old, and that's why I can't get ahead in my life. It's a meme, and we hear this. So much of therapeutic talk is just convincing people about what they can't do, about what their excuses are, telling them because this happened to you when you were a child. Everything that happened to you as a child had to happen. The evidence for that? It did. And if it did, then you either deal with it and move on with it and learn from it, or you use it as an excuse. And I've used that over and over in my own life as well. And it's something that you want to take a real hard look at. I'm too busy. The final two were the most frequently cited. I'm too busy. And I'm scared. It just frightens me. I live in fear. The Course in Miracles says there are only two emotions in this world: fear and love. Fear, everything that is fear cannot be love. Everything that is love cannot be fear. So you must hear an awful lot of talk on the television and reading the newspapers and so on about all the things that we have to be afraid of. You don't want to live in a place of fear. Every piece of fear that you have within you, every thought that revolves around fear is a meme, a mind virus that tells you there's going to be danger, you can't do anything about it. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of these excuses that people employ in their life are all things that we don't have to have. What I'd like to do now is speak to you about some of the important principles that are involved in moving into the paradigm. The excuses be gone paradigm is the promise that I made at the beginning of the show, that there is a step-by-step way that you can look within, ask certain questions of yourself, examine them, and move away from using excuses forever. Okay, the first of these principles is called awareness. The ego and awareness cannot coexist together. The ego is a kind of thinking that says that who I am is what I have and what I do and what other people think of me, and that I'm separate from everyone else, and I'm separate from God, and I evaluate myself on the basis of this. And many of you grew up with this idea that who you are is what you do, what you accumulate, what other people think of you, your reputation, and so on. Thinking with awareness is thinking from the highest place that there is. It's the kind of thinking that allows excuses to be eradicated from your life. It's the thinking that is talked about in the New Testament. With God, all things are possible. Now you tell me, what does that leave out? What does all things are possible leave out? Nothing, does it? So when you think from a place of awareness, you think in terms of, instead of using one of these excuses that you see popping up here on these little thought bubbles across the stage, I can't do it, I'm too tired, I'm too old, it's going to be difficult, it's going to take a long time, which is all the ego stuff which promotes these mind viruses and these memes. Instead of that, when you think with awareness, your first thought is, no matter what it is, if you get a cold, if you get if you hurt yourself in some way, your first thought isn't, oh, this is something I can't do anything about and I'm going to be hobbled and I'm going to... Your first thought is, with God, all things are possible. With Source, all things are possible. It doesn't mean that you're instantly healed and the cold is going to go away, but you set your mind on a new way of looking at virtually anything that comes into your life. All things are possible. And getting to that place in your life it's one of the most beautiful things that you can experience. And I try to practice this over and over and again, whatever it might be, whether it's a family crisis, whether it's a financial crisis, whatever it may be. Instead of saying that with the economy and it's going to turn down and terrible things are going to happen and I'm going to lose my job, you instantly, you have a thought, an affirmation within you that says, I can handle this. I am not alone. I can make myself get through this. I have the solution is going to be out there. I may not know what it is, but my thoughts are always on it's possible. So that's the first of these principles. The second of these principles is something that I call alignment. Hear this and hear this well. All excuses are misalignments. And when I say misalignment, I mean you're misaligned from your source. You came into this world from this perfect, this beautiful place. I have a wonderful paraphrase of a quote by T.S. Eliot. He said, we shall not cease from exploration. And at the end of all of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we originated and to know it for the first time. He was talking about death, I think. I'm saying, why should we have to die in order to get to that place? To know, to really know our source. I've quoted it many times of Albert Einstein when he was asked a question about quantum physics or something. Again, it's a paraphrase. He said, all of that is just details. He said, I just want to learn to think like God thinks. That's really what alignment means. You think like the source thinks. And if you get to that place, you have to understand that whatever the creative source in the universe is, whether you call it the Tao or God or source or divine mind, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't need any excuses, does it? It doesn't ever say, well, I'd really like to create some rose bushes here, but I'm too busy. My hands are tied. I can't get to that right now. I'm a little old. I've been doing this for a long time. It's like, I'm tired. That's all I ever do. It's like, it doesn't do that. It just allows. It just allows. That's how you want to think. And every excuse that you saw coming up in these thought bubbles out there is really just a misalignment. You want to move to that. A third principle is called contemplation. Aristotle had a wonderful quote. He said, contemplation is the highest form of activity. That what you think about isn't just a thought that pops into your mind, but that when you think from a contemplative point of view about what it is that you would like to create, you aren't just having a passive thought. What you're doing is putting into practice an action. It's a verb, contemplation. It's a verb. It's a way of acting. And I brought with me here tonight a few points written by a great man who lived in the early part of the last century. His name was Thomas Troward. And he was one of the authors of how to deal with the science of mental health. He listed the specifics of what happens when you contemplate in a certain way. And I'd like to share it with you here. These are the steps of contemplation. Now listen to these. I'm just going to spell them out one by one. First, number one, contemplation is the continual use of your thought process. That's what it is. Your thoughts, number two, your thoughts are actually like things that act to begin the process of materialization. They begin this process of attracting into your life what you want. If you contemplate with thoughts that match originating spirit, using his words, you have the same power as originating spirit. You got to really hear that. If you contemplate with thoughts that match originating spirit, that is, if you think like God thinks, like Source thinks, like that which creates everything, then you have the same power as the Source. When contemplation is a match to originating spirit, you gain the cooperation of divine mind, attracting and fulfilling your desires. But our thoughts can never be on these excuses. You can't use those. Contemplation is therefore, according to Troward, a kind of action in and of itself, which sets into motion all of the creative forces of the universe. That is, as you begin to contemplate from a perspective of all things are possible, and I can create what I want for myself in your life, you set into motion the creative forces that are operating in the universe. When you rely on excuses, says Troward, you allow your false self, the ego, to contemplate what you do not want or why you cannot create it for yourself. That's what an excuse is. I can't do this, I'm too old, it's past my prime, it's going to be difficult, it's going to take a long time, it's going to be risky. Every excuse that you have is a contemplation. The presence of excuses in your life is evidence that you contemplate what you can't do or have, rather than the infinite possibilities that are inherent in the divine creative self. Do you see how an excuse is a contemplative action focused on what you don't want or what you can't get or why you can't have it? He said, to rid yourself of excuses, you must learn to practice contemplating what you intend to manifest and simultaneously detach from the outcome. These are my conclusions, my words, okay? So you want to rid yourself of excuses in order to practice contemplating what you want to manifest, what you intend to manifest, and then you detach from the outcome, you let it go. And finally, he says, contemplate like God does, with thoughts of how may I serve rather than what's in it for me. You become more of a divine being. There was a great teacher from India who came over here in the early part of last century. His name was Vivekananda. And he said these words, or words similar to them. He said, if you want to know how to do this, if you want to know how to get rid of this ego, this false self, and really tune into the authentic self, which needs no excuses, he said, in the springtime, go out and observe the blossoms on the fruit trees. He said, the blossoms vanish of themselves as the fruit grows. So too will the lower self, the false self, the ego, vanish as the divine grows within you. You don't have to defeat anything. You don't have to beat anything. You don't have to win. You don't have to be ahead of somebody else. You allow the divine to grow within you, and that's the essence of the paradigm. I saw a documentary film recently. It was unbelievable. It's called Man on Wire. And it's the story of the guy who rigged a wire between the two towers of the World Trade Center back in 1974. And he was in his dentist's office. He was a young boy. And this was before the World Trade Centers had even been built. There was an artist's conception of what they would look like. And this is a man who he just lived on a wire. He loved to do the type wire, and it was just amazing to watch him do this. And he's there are pictures of him on the edge of the World Trade Center, a quarter of a mile up in the air, walking like this. At any rate, he had a vision. and he tore that out of the magazine. He tore that picture out, and he put it in his pocket. He had a toothache. He forgot about his toothache. He left the dentist's office, and he went and he contemplated this thing from a young boy until he did it in 1974, and he did it in other places as well, in his imagination. And to be able to accomplish what he did, they had to smuggle a ton of equipment by guards who were standing guard at the top of the World Trade Center. And then he had to take a bow and arrow, and he had to shoot an arrow with a string all the way across, so it landed on the 200 feet away. He had one arrow to do it, and it landed just on the edge. And then they pulled the string, and then they pulled the rope, and then the rope was attached to a cable, and they had a whole group of people doing this. Of course, I don't know if you remember this in 1974, but the reason it's called Man on Wire, because that was the crime he was accused of. They didn't know what else to accuse him of. And not only did he walk across the World Trade Center as his dharma, as something that he knew he had to do, but as soon as he would get over to the edge and the police were up there to grab him, he would just smile. And then he'd turn around and he'd walk back this way. And he'd go down on his knees and he'd do a little dance. A quarter of a mile in the air. And he did it at the Notre Dame, the two towers of Notre Dame. This is his life, Man on Wire. But the reason I say that is when you contemplate like that, and when you have an imagination like that, you have to create it. So he asks us, instead of thinking about what might happen, Troward asks us to think from the end. Another one of these principles is called willingness. How willing are you to attract into your life what you want and to rid yourself of the excuses? The willingness means suspending all of your blame. It means taking total responsibility for everything that is in your life, including the memes that were handed to you by your well-meaning parents and their neighbors and so on. To say, I did it all. It also means surrendering. Willingness means, in the recovery movement, and many of you know that I have been without alcohol now for 20 years plus, and just gave it up. And the reason that I gave it up, and the reason I was able to do it, was through being willing to say, I surrender. I just let go. And what? Let God, right? And allow this divine source. You see, if the ego was in charge of you, then why would you get old? I was sitting in an interview today with Kenny Blanchard, and he's turning 70 and I'm turning 69. And I said, if the ego was really in charge, we wouldn't be sitting here in these 68-year-old bodies. We'd keep it about 23, wouldn't we? Because, that's when we feel that we're the most powerful and when we have, but there's something else that's in charge. And not just in charge of our bodies and its aging, but there's something you have to surrender to that's even bigger than all of us. And you have to be willing to do that, to know that everything that you came here to do is a part of that. Willingness means shedding all things that you're unwilling to do. I remember when I did my very first PBS special back in 1999. And I went around the country and I visited PBS stations in every market. It made no difference to me how many people were there, whether it was a tiny little market or a very large market. Whatever they asked me to do, I said, I have nothing on my unwillingness category. And I made over 170 station visits, very often paying my own expenses and living on a very, very tight budget. But I knew that I wanted to take the messages that I'm speaking about here and that I spoke about in my earlier programs, and there was nothing I was unwilling to do. I did it when Erroneous Zones was published back in 1976. Bought up the first two printings, went across the country, paid for my own expenses, 14-hour days doing interviews, whatever it might be, whatever it takes. Just have that willingness. Virginia Woolf, no one's afraid of her, right? She had a wonderful line. She said, arrange whatever pieces come your way. Whatever it is that comes your way, no matter how tough it may be, whatever, arrange whatever pieces come your way and make it work for you. I'd like to speak for just a moment about passion as a principle for eliminating excuses. Create for yourself the habit of enthusiasm about everything. When I watched the interview with Felipe, who was the guy who was the man on wire, he said, you have to have passion every single day. And what does the word enthusiasm mean? Entheos, God. Yasm, within, in Greek. The God within. That's the meaning of it. When you have passion for anything inside of you, you are really, that's God speaking to you. If you have total passion for something and you just won't let go of it, regardless of what the circumstances of your life are, you will find a way. The universe will provide you with a way. The strange synchronistic experiences and serendipities that seem to show up, they show up much more frequently and right on time when you're living from a place of passion. No passion? Continue with your excuses. Passion is the creative source inside of you. Walk with it. I do it every day. Hold hands with it. Make it your number one relationship in life, not to your spouse, not to your children, not even to yourself. Make your number one relationship to your source, to God, to that place from which you returned, to which all things return. Live from a place of passion, and you will be guided. Those principles that I've just spoken briefly about, alignment, passion, willingness, they're all exemplified in someone that I'd like to introduce to America. His name is Dan Caro, C-A-R-O, Dan Caro. He was born in 1979. And on St. Patrick's Day in 1982, on March the 17th, he was out in his backyard. He's from New Orleans, Louisiana. His mom was watching him, and he scooted off just for a second into the garage. And in the garage, there was a can of gasoline, and he tipped it over, and there was a hot water heater in there with a flame, a pilot, and it exploded. It was a flash fire, and this little 2-year-old boy was burned over 75 to 80% of his body. He was just awash in fire. His mother ran in fact, his mother and father are both here this evening and flew here for this program. And I heard about Dan from my dear sweet friend Tiffany, who also is from New Orleans, and she said she had met this young man and he just really made an impact on her. And over the course of the next 12 or 14 years, he underwent 80 plus surgeries at the Shriner Hospital up in Massachusetts. When they wrapped him up, and they have to wrap them, and when they unwrapped his hands, his hand fell off. And when they unwrapped his other hand, his fingers and his hand fell off. And when they unwrapped his feet, after all of this therapy and his toes fell off. He was scarred from head to toe, burnt, and no one even anticipated that he would survive. But there's something inside Dan Caro that exemplifies the excuses begone life that I'm speaking about here in this program. Music is in his life. His father loved music. He's from New Orleans, city of jazz. He always envisioned himself as a musician, and yet he was hopelessly burned, and everyone thought that he probably wouldn't even live to be 3 or 4. But there was something inside of Dan, that compassion, that passion, that willingness, that desire to make something more of himself. He wanted to be a musician more than anything. Music was in his soul, even when he was 2 years old, and I've seen pictures of that beautiful little 2-year-old boy. And, well, he not only became a musician, but he was written up in a journal called Modern Drummer. He became a drummer without any hands. Try to imagine that. Not only did he become a drummer, but he became a very well-known drummer, playing in very significant bands across the South. At Loyola University, he was in the jazz band. And he had to do it by eliminating all of the excuses. And I invited Dan to come on my program when I met with him, and I've had him speak with me, and he will knock you out. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like him to speak a little bit to you and then maybe even show you what it is that he does. My friend, Dan Caro.